Next, from Carbondale, we speak with Professor Charlie Leonard of the Paul Simon Institute and hear which candidates are now in the lead in the race for governor of Illinois. With the primary election 1 year away, we hear who's leading the pack in seeking the Democratic and Republican nominations. This runs about 20 minutes.
Professor Charlie Leonard with the Paul Simon Institute in Carbondale, we thank you for joining us again on the Illinois.
Thank you, Terry.
We wanted to follow up because you have recently just taken a poll on a number of issues concerning Illinois public policy. One of the ones that we might want to start with, that we got some initial information and feedback from, is a poll of potential candidates for Illinois governor. And as a reminder to the viewers, the primary for both parties for governor is just 1 year away. It'll be in March of 2014. So let's start with the Democratic candidates. Of course, Governor Quinn at this point is expected to be a candidate for re-election. What did you find as you polled people around the state of Illinois and their preferences for governor on the Democratic side of the ledger?
Terry, we polled 600 registered voters across the state of Illinois, and as you mentioned, we'll be releasing our poll numbers on issue questions in the next couple of days. But when we asked the voters for their partisan identification, we asked Democrats about the field of Democratic candidates, and we asked Republicans about the field of Republican candidates. So our numbers for these party primary races are much smaller. We had 310 of the 600 tell us they were Democrats, and we asked them if the election were held today, would they vote for Lisa Madigan, Pat Quinn, or Bill Daley. Madigan, the Attorney General, of course, and Bill Daley, the former Commerce Secretary and Chief of Staff for President Obama. First, in terms of numbers, is Attorney General Madigan, who received the support of about 32% of Democrats in our sample. Governor Quinn was second, 9 points behind, with about 23% of the Democrats in our sample. And Bill Daley was third with about 12%. Perhaps not surprisingly, this far out from the primary, actually 28% were undecided, and about 5% mentioned someone else who we didn't ask about specifically. So actually, Attorney General Madigan is about tied with don't know. And Governor Quinn has fewer votes in this poll than undecided does.
When you asked that, was there a follow-up question if they said, named a candidate such as Quinn or Attorney General Madigan? Did you ask a follow-up as to why they preferred them or not? If there was one particular
no,
issue?
We didn't ask any open-ended questions after that, just a straight preference poll.
Now, and then on the Republican side, you also candidates or potential candidates for governor. What did you find as far as the voters' preference on that side?
Well, we found what we expected to find, which is a mess. Because we had 3, 6, 8 candidates that we included who have expressed interest in running in the primary, and a lot of them don't have a lot of name recognition. So we had 3 potential candidates with about 9 or 10% support. Treasurer Dan Rutherford got 10% in our poll. State Senator Bill Brady, who ran unsuccessfully against Governor Quinn, got about 10%. And U.S. Representative Aaron Schock got about 9% in our poll. And everyone else, with former Congressman Joe Walsh with about 6, on down to the wealthy businessman Bruce Rauner, who's expected to self-fund a campaign, actually got no preference, no votes in our poll. Over half, however, said they didn't know or were undecided. 53% of our relatively small sample of Republican voters are undecided.
You know, let me ask, we just obviously came out of a presidential election. The poll was just taken, I believe, at the end of January and the early part of February. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why take this now when some might say that you have voter fatigue coming out of the fall elections and the gubernatorial race is still a year away?
Politics never stops, Terry. It is early in the race, and we decided to do this just to give ourselves a snapshot of where the race is in its formative stages. We don't expect to make a whole lot of news about this, and we don't expect it to be anything close to predictive of what's going to happen. But as you noted at the outset, the primaries are a year away. And sometime late next fall, they're going to have to register with the Secretary of State as candidates. So we're a year from the primary, but we're 6 months or so away from the time when candidates have to actually declare. So it's a good snapshot in time. We'll ask the gubernatorial questions again in our fall poll, and then we'll have a point in time to refer to see what kind of movement has occurred.
I know that as we tape this, it is the 13th of February. You are going to be releasing more information about some other topics in the coming days, and you don't want to release all that information necessarily now, although by the time this airs, I think you will have released some of that information. What are some of the other topics that you were polling the callers on?
Well, we decided that this would be a good time as the legislature gears up for spring session to give our legislators, to give you in the media, to give activists a snapshot of where Illinois voters' opinions are on gun control issues. We have a fair number of questions on gun control, how people feel about the state budget and how to deal with the budget deficit, and some questions on how we might deal with the massive underfunded pension crisis, as well as a few social issues to track movement on same-sex marriage, on abortion, and we've asked a question about medical marijuana as well.
Were there any particular surprises in what you got back from the voters?
Not particularly, keeping in mind that most of the political weight in the state is in Chicago and its suburbs, something we tend to forget from time to time way down here in extreme southern Illinois. But Illinois voters are going to skew liberal on some of these causes. I think we'll see continued acceptance of same-sex marriage in the state. It's moved rapidly in the last year or so. I think the growth in acceptance is sort of plateauing. We'll see Illinoisans favoring most of the gun control issues that have been talked about. We'll see continued resistance to new taxes to fix the budget deficit, and we'll see acceptance of some of the proposals that have been made to changes in pension benefits for state employees.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you about whether you were taking the pulse of the people as far as the gun control measures. You said you have. Does that,
yes.
Does this point, and you said that the people were more or less favorable, meaning they were for less gun control, I take it as what you're saying.
They're for more gun. They're for more gun control.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then I wonder how that kind of squares with the federal court mandate that Illinois get along with passing a concealed carry bill.
Yeah, we asked, I don't think we asked that directly. I don't have those numbers in front of me. We did ask if it should be illegal for anyone but police or other authorized people to carry a handgun. And on that question, Illinoisans said no. So concealed carry in some form would probably be acceptable to most Illinois voters. That question was the one exception to the mostly pro-gun control stance of the voters in our survey.
The tax increase that was passed that and is a couple of years ago in January and is going to supposedly be a temporary tax increase. The legislature will have to make a decision on whether to extend that or allow it to come off the books. And they'll probably have to be doing that, well, they'll have to be doing that sometime this year, more or less in the fall, I would say.
Yes. Right.
What do the voters think about that issue, if you've talked about that specifically?
We did ask, and again, I don't have those numbers here at the table, but like almost any tax measure that we propose, the voters are against it. They're against making it permanent. I'm not sure, we didn't explain in our questioning, you know, what happens to our budget when that temporary tax goes away. But we say, do you favor or oppose making that tax increase permanent? The voters oppose it.
Yeah, it is, you know, let me ask you as a pollster a couple of basic questions about that. When you measure the view of people as a pollster, on one hand, just ask a fundamental question. What is the point of polling? How do you imagine the information to be valuable or utilized? And secondly, let's talk about an issue such as the temporary tax increase. Someone may have a view, but is their viewpoint on any issue valid if they really aren't up to speed on what the fundamental facts are behind that issue?
Right. Your first question is, what is the value of a survey like this? In our mind, it is to show legislators, journalists, people interested in public policy where the voters in the state of Illinois are on important questions. So that if a legislator is wavering on her vote on an issue, say limiting high-capacity ammunition magazines, she can see that the majority of Illinoisans, to pick a question at random, favor that public policy. And it's important to know on any issue where the people stand if you are a legislator. We believe we're providing a service to the politicians, to the media, to people in the policy community to show where that is. Now, your second question is, of what value is an informed versus an uninformed opinion? We have a great example of that in a time series. We will have asked this particular question 4 times now since 2009. And we say, the state of Illinois has a budget deficit of X million dollars. That number changes every year, so we update that number. This year we said the state of Illinois has a budget deficit of about $4 billion. I'm going to read you 3 statements that people make on how to fix that deficit. One is, we need more revenue. We've cut everything we can cut. The second one is, there's waste and inefficiency in state government, and if you cut the waste and inefficiency in government, there's enough money. And the third is, the problem is so bad we need both cuts and new revenue. And all 4 times we've asked this, between 54 and 57% of the voters we interview say there's $4 billion or whatever billion dollars worth of waste and inefficiency in state government to cut. And you and I, who've looked at budgets, know that there's not $4 billion worth of waste and inefficiency in the government. And if you've been in government agencies or buildings that aren't filling unfilled positions, that aren't hiring, that have leaky roofs, that have old equipment, you can see it's hard to find $4 billion to cut. If you laid off every state legislator and closed the Capitol, you couldn't get $4 billion worth of waste and inefficiency. So people have entrenched beliefs about things like government waste when their opinion is wrong. It's wrong. Is it important to know that a majority have an opinion that's not true? Yeah, it's important to know that.
Well, I suppose then that it would tell if a legislator or the governor is going to propose making the tax increase permanent, as and you may expect that they will, this shows is that they have a challenge of educating the voters as to why that would be needed.
Absolutely, Terry. You've been around this business long enough to know that state government in Illinois has a big credibility problem. Even someone that is widely viewed as a straightforward guy like Pat Quinn, but people who know of him and his career know that he's going to have a really hard sell job to tell people that we don't have $4 billion worth of waste to cut and we have to get revenue from somewhere, and that allowing that tax increase to go away will drop an enormous fiscal bomb on the state. But state government's credibility is strained, so it's a terrible pinch to be in, to have to tell it a truth that no one wants to hear from a source that most people don't see as credible.
Charlie, before time runs out, just again, let's run through well, first of all, when are you going to release all of the information from your poll? And if people wanted to get some of the nitty-gritty information, where would they be able to find that information?
In the next day or so, we'll be releasing the numbers on social issues. After that, we'll be releasing the numbers on gun control, and then the budget and pension crisis questions will be released early next week. And people can find all of our news releases and all the full reports on our polls at paulsimoninstitute.org.
All right. Well, Professor Charles Leonard, a.k.a. Charlie Leonard, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us again today. It was an interesting topic and some interesting findings, and certainly it shows, I guess, what on one hand we already knew, that we're going in Illinois into some major political elections in 2014, and it is going to be one of the more turbulent elections, I think, that we've seen in many years within the state of Illinois.
I think that's right. Always a pleasure to be with you, Terry.
All right. Well, thank you again.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.